I'm from Connecticut, and a while back, I was in a long-distance relationship with a girl from Georgia. I would often hit the road to visit her, and to be honest, I did not mind the drive. There is just something about cruising along the highways of the United States by yourself that feels so liberating. I have driven across the country and back, all on my own, and each trip felt like a little adventure. To save some cash, I would sleep in my car during these trips. It is not as bad as it sounds. It is basically like camping, but with a metal tent. It makes you feel like you are really roughing it. I would just recline the seat, keep the key in the ignition just in case, and drift off to sleep. I never bothered to put anything up to block the windows for privacy, though maybe I should have. The drive down south usually took me 2 days. I would often stop somewhere along the Virginia-North Carolina border to rest. On my last trip, I did the same thing. Rest stops were quieter and less crowded compared to truck stops. Normally, I would have pulled into a Love's truck stop, but that night I was so tired that I settled for the first rest stop I saw. It was strangely empty, with only a couple of cars sitting under the dim street lamps, probably other travelers with the same idea as me. I parked away from the others, under the shadow of a tree, far from the streetlights. I figured it would give me more privacy. As usual, I locked my doors, cracked the window slightly for some fresh air, kept the key in the ignition, reclined the seat, and closed my eyes. I had never had any trouble sleeping in my car before, so I did not expect anything different that night. Then a sharp tapping sound woke me up. At first, I thought I had heard it in my dream. I opened my eyes, feeling a bit confused. Since I was leaned back, I could not see much. I heard the tapping again, like a small object hitting a hard surface. The sound came in an irregular rhythm. Was it raining? Was water dripping onto my windshield? Maybe something fell from the tree above. What if it was a squirrel or a bird? Or what if it was not an animal at all? The unsettling thought that it might be a person outside crossed my mind. What did they want? Were my doors locked? Yes, the keys were in the ignition, so I could leave in an instant if needed. Still, I lay there pretending to be asleep, hoping whoever it was would go away. It felt safer not to know. I was too scared to find out. Blissful ignorance seemed like the best option, but the tapping continued. I could not just stay there. I had to look. My heart was pounding so hard I thought whoever was outside could probably hear it. I decided to look. Slowly, I raised my head to see what was making the noise. What I saw froze me in sheer terror. The faint light from the street lamps revealed a face pressed against my windshield. It looked like a woman, her face twisted into a grotesque grin. Her eyes were rolled back, showing only the whites, and her lips were stretched wide, revealing rotten teeth. Even in the dim light, I could see her skin was pale, contrasting with her long, dirty black hair. Whoever she was not in her right mind. I do not know how long I sat there, paralyzed with fear. Finally, I snapped out of it and reached for the ignition. The engine roared to life, the sound a relief in that moment. For a split second, I feared I might be in a horror movie scenario where the car would not start as the killer approached. I reversed as quickly as I could, trying not to give this creepy woman a chance to do anything. In my panic, I remember turning on the windshield wipers, as if that would help. Was I about to drive away with this lunatic on my hood? Thankfully, as soon as I started moving, she jumped off, landing on all fours. Seeing my chance, I shifted into drive and floored it. Just as I sped away, I saw her reaching for the driver's side door. With my foot on the gas, I raced out of the parking lot. Behind me, I heard her let out a blood-curdling shriek. I glanced in my rearview mirror, and for a moment I thought I saw her chasing after me, running on all fours with her black hair flying wildly around her. I could not get a good look as I rounded a curve and merged onto the highway. There I picked up speed and drove through the night, not daring to stop until the morning light. After that terrifying night, I tried to shake off the fear and focus on getting to Georgia. The sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the landscape, and I felt a bit more at ease. The interstate was bustling with morning traffic, a comforting sign of normalcy. Still, I could not forget the woman's twisted face and the eerie way she had been lying on my hood. It haunted me. By the time I reached my girlfriend's place in Georgia, I was exhausted but relieved. Her name was Emily, and she had this way of making everything feel all right. I did not want to worry her, so I decided not to tell her about the strange woman at the rest stop. Instead, I focused on enjoying the time we had together. We spent the days exploring local spots, eating at our favorite diners, and just enjoying each other's company. Being with Emily was like a breath of fresh air. A few days later, it was time for me to head back to Connecticut. Emily and I said our goodbyes, promising to see each other soon. I was feeling pretty good as I started the long drive north. The weather was clear and the traffic was light. Everything seemed fine. As night began to fall, I started looking for a place to rest. Despite my unsettling experience on the way down, I did not want to spend money on a motel. I figured I would be fine as long as I chose a busy, well-lit spot. I found a rest area that seemed safe enough, with several cars and trucks parked under the bright lights. I parked near a couple of trucks, thinking the presence of other people would keep anything weird from happening. I went through my usual routine, locked the doors, cracked the window, reclined the seat, and closed my eyes. I was tired from the long drive and fell asleep quickly. A few hours later, something woke me up. It was a sound, faint but distinct. Knock. My heart sank. I did not want to open my eyes, but I had to know if it was happening again. Slowly, I lifted my head and looked around. Nothing. Just the empty rest stop, bathed in the artificial glow of the streetlights. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Maybe I was just imagining things, my mind playing tricks on me after the ordeal on the way down. I lay back down, determined to get some sleep. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was louder, closer. My skin crawled. I forced myself to look out the window, and there she was, the same woman with her horrifying grin and those lifeless eyes. She was standing right next to my car, her face inches from the window. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for the key in the ignition, my hands shaking. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the car into reverse. The woman stepped back, her grin never wavering. I did not wait to see what she would do next. I sped out of the rest stop, not caring if I woke anyone up with the noise. As I drove down the dark highway, I kept glancing in my mirrors, half expecting to see her running after me again. My mind raced with questions. Who was she? Why was she following me? What did she want? I had no answers, only a growing sense of dread. I drove through the night, pushing my car to its limits. I did not stop until I was far from that rest area, with the morning sun rising behind me. Only then did I start to relax, the miles putting distance between me and the nightmare that seemed to be following me. When I finally pulled into my driveway, back in Connecticut, I was exhausted but grateful to be home. The familiar surroundings brought a sense of comfort. I hoped that whatever had happened on the road would stay there, far away from me. But a part of me knew that I would never forget the woman with the twisted grin and the haunting way she had watched me from the darkness. The weeks went by, and life slowly returned to normal. I tried to put the unsettling encounters out of my mind, focusing on everyday things in my routine. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't completely shake the memory of that woman's horrifying face. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I received a call from Emily. She had been thinking about our time together and wanted to catch up. I was happy to hear from her and glad for the distraction. We chatted for a while, reminiscing about the good times we had and discussing plans for future visits. It was nice to talk about something normal and pleasant. As I was about to hang up, Emily mentioned something that sent a shiver down my spine. She said she had heard about some strange occurrences at rest stops in the area, with reports of people seeing bizarre figures and feeling like they were being watched. I tried to laugh it off, but inside I felt a knot of unease tighten. The next few days I tried to dismiss Emily's comment as just a coincidence or a case of urban legends spreading online. But deep down I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was seriously wrong. Then one evening, I received a message from a friend who had been on a road trip recently. He said he had a creepy encounter at a rest stop that sounded eerily similar to mine. A woman with a distorted grin and unsettling eyes had approached his car, and he had barely managed to escape. My heart raced as I read his message, and I felt a cold sweat break out. It seemed that my experience was not as isolated as I had hoped. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I decided to do some research. I started by looking up local news articles and online forums for any reports of similar incidents. To my horror, I found several accounts of people experiencing strange and terrifying encounters at various rest stops across the country. The descriptions were almost identical to what I had witnessed. One story stood out, a chilling account of a woman who had been seen lurking around rest stops for years. Witnesses described her as having an eerie smile and vacant eyes. They claimed she seemed to appear out of nowhere and had a way of making people feel like they were being stalked. Some even reported that she had disappeared before anyone could get a good look at her. The more I read, the more convinced I became that this woman was the same one I had encountered. I started to feel like I was being drawn into a nightmare that I couldn't escape. Despite my fear, I decided to continue my trips and not let this woman control my life. I planned to be more cautious and to avoid stopping at any rest areas that seemed deserted or poorly lit. I hoped that by being vigilant, I could avoid another terrifying encounter. On my next drive, I followed my new safety routine carefully. I chose well-lit, busy rest stops and avoided parking in isolated areas. Each time I saw a shadow or heard a noise, my heart would race, but I tried to stay calm and collected. One night, while driving through a rural stretch of highway, I spotted a rest stop that seemed a bit too quiet for my liking. It was well lit, but the parking lot was almost empty. I debated whether to stop or push on, but fatigue won out and I pulled in. I parked near a few other vehicles, hoping that the presence of others would make me feel safe. I went through my usual routine, but this time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every noise outside made me jump, and I kept checking the windows for any signs of movement. Sleep was elusive, and my mind raced with thoughts of the woman and the stories I had read. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of tapping. My blood ran cold as I recognized the rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. It was happening again. I dared not look outside immediately. Instead, I lay still, trying to calm my racing heart. I could hear the tapping growing louder, and my fear grew with it. I had to look. Slowly, I raised my head and peeked out the window. What I saw made my stomach churn. The same woman, with her grotesque grin and lifeless eyes, was standing outside my car. This time, she seemed more menacing, her expression even more twisted. Her face was pressed against the glass, and I could see the pale skin and filthy hair clearly. I felt like I was going to faint. I acted quickly, starting the engine and slamming the car into reverse. The woman's eerie smile never wavered as she stepped back. I sped out of the parking lot, my heart pounding in my chest. Behind me, I heard her shriek, a sound that pierced through the night. As I drove away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see her chasing me. The darkness of the road stretched ahead, and I drove through the night, determined not to stop until I was far from that place. When morning finally came, I pulled over at a safe spot and took a deep breath. The daylight brought some relief, but the fear was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. I couldn't escape the feeling that this nightmare was far from over. After that harrowing night, I couldn't shake the sense of dread that clung to me. The woman's face seemed to haunt my every thought, and I felt a constant, unnerving presence as I continued my journey. I was desperate to put as much distance between myself and that rest stop as possible. Days passed, and I returned to my normal routine, trying to find some semblance of normalcy. I threw myself into work and daily tasks, hoping to distract myself from the unsettling experiences. But no matter how busy I stayed, the memory of those encounters lingered, gnawing at my peace of mind. One evening, I decided to take a short trip to clear my head. I went to a nearby park, hoping the fresh air and change of scenery would help. I sat by the water, watching the sunset and trying to relax. Just as I started to feel a bit of calm, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Emily. She had come across something online that she thought might interest me. She sent me a link to a news article about a series of mysterious disappearances at rest stops in various states. The article mentioned a woman with a disfigured face and a disturbing smile who had been seen near these locations. The descriptions matched my experiences exactly. The article suggested that there might be a connection between these incidents, and authorities were investigating whether there was a pattern or a common link. The chilling part was that the woman had never been identified, and no one knew her motives or origins. Some theories suggested she might be a vengeful spirit. while others thought she could be part of a more sinister plot. Reading the article made my blood run cold. It seemed like there was something deeply unsettling and possibly dangerous about this woman. I was now more determined than ever to avoid rest stops and any isolated areas during my travels. To make sure I stayed safe, I started planning my trips with extreme caution. I mapped out my routes to avoid rest areas and isolated spots as much as possible. I made sure to stop only at well-lit, busy locations and to stay alert for any unusual activity. Despite my precautions, the fear was always there, lurking just below the surface. Every time I stopped for a break or even parked for a few moments, I felt a twinge of anxiety, as if I were waiting for something terrible to happen. One day, while driving through a remote stretch of highway, my worst fears seemed to come true. The car's engine started sputtering, and before long, I was stranded on the side of the road. I had no choice but to call for roadside assistance. As I waited, I couldn't help but feel a sense of impending doom. The sun was setting, and the light was fading quickly. I kept scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement, my heart racing with each passing minute. The road was desolate, with only a few distant headlights visible. The area was eerily quiet, amplifying my growing sense of dread. As the tow truck finally arrived, I felt a wave of relief. The driver, a burly man with a friendly demeanor, started working on my car. I tried to make small talk, but my anxiety was palpable. I kept glancing around, convinced that something was watching us from the shadows. While the driver worked, I noticed a figure standing in the distance. My heart skipped a beat as I squinted to get a better look. The figure was partially obscured by the darkness, but it looked eerily familiar. The woman from my nightmares seemed to be lurking in the shadows, her distorted face barely visible. Panic surged through me. I wanted to warn the driver, but my voice caught in my throat. The woman seemed to be moving closer, her presence more menacing than ever. I could see the grotesque smile and the lifeless eyes, just as I had remembered them. In a moment of sheer desperation, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I explained the situation as best as I could, my voice trembling. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way. But as the minutes ticked by, I felt like the darkness was closing in around me. When the tow truck driver finished, I jumped into the cab, desperate to get away. The woman was nowhere to be seen, but the fear remained. As we drove away from the scene, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that the woman was out there, waiting for her chance to strike. Back home, I took some time off from driving and focused on finding other ways to travel. I couldn't bear the thought of encountering her again. The idea of getting back on the road filled me with dread, and I found myself avoiding long trips whenever possible. But even in the safety of my own home, the fear lingered. The woman's face haunted my dreams, and I could not escape the feeling that she was always out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for her next chance to terrorize someone else. I had hoped that by staying vigilant and avoiding rest stops, I could keep myself safe. But the fear remained, a constant reminder that some nightmares are not easily escaped, no matter how far you travel. Weeks turned into months, and I worked hard to reclaim a sense of normalcy. The lingering fear of encountering the woman again was always there, like a shadow that followed me wherever I went. I kept to familiar routines, avoided long drives, and stayed close to well-traveled routes, but the anxiety never fully left me. Then one day, Emily called with exciting news. She wanted to visit me in Connecticut for a few days. I was thrilled at the prospect of seeing her and spending time together, hoping it would bring some much-needed relief from my ongoing fears. When she arrived, we picked up right where we left off, enjoying each other's company and trying to move past the unsettling memories. One evening, as we were relaxing at my place, Emily broached the subject of my past encounters. She had been doing some more research and found troubling updates about similar incidents across the country. The descriptions of the mysterious woman matched mine perfectly, and authorities were still puzzled by the pattern. No one seemed to know where she came from or why she targeted people at rest stops. That night, we decided to take a late-night drive to clear our heads and talk more about what Emily had discovered. The roads were familiar, and with Emily by my side, I felt a rare sense of comfort and security. We discussed our plans for the future, and for a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. As we drove through a remote stretch of highway, my heart suddenly leapt into my throat. In the dim glow of distant streetlights, I saw a shadowy figure standing by the side of the road. My pulse quickened as I recognized the menacing silhouette. It was her, the same woman who had haunted my nightmares. I pulled over, my hands trembling. Emily noticed my sudden shift in demeanor and immediately became concerned. I explained what I had seen, and although she tried to reassure me, her eyes betrayed her own worry. We decided to approach the figure cautiously, hoping to determine if it was indeed the woman or just a figment of my imagination. As we got closer, the figure came into clearer view. My worst fears were confirmed. It was her, with the grotesque smile and the hollow, lifeless eyes that I had seen before. Emily's grip tightened on my arm, and I could see the fear in her eyes. Without hesitation, I slammed the car into reverse, my mind racing. We sped away from the figure, my heart pounding with every beat. The woman's eerie laughter echoed behind us, sending chills down my spine. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her briefly illuminated by the headlights, her twisted grin visible as she seemed to follow us. We drove for miles, not stopping until we reached a bustling town with bright lights and a crowd of people. The diner we found was a sanctuary of warmth and safety, a stark contrast to the terror we had just experienced. We stayed there until the first light of dawn, unable to return to my place or even think clearly. As the morning sun began to rise, I realized that I could no longer let fear dictate my life. The woman's presence had become a symbol of the unknown and the unsettling, but I couldn't allow her to control my actions any longer. With Emily's support, I sought help from professionals who specialized in trauma and anxiety. Therapy became a crucial part of my healing process. Through therapy, I learned to confront my fears and develop strategies to manage my anxiety. It was a challenging journey, but each session helped me regain a sense of control. Emily stood by me every step of the way, and her support was invaluable. We worked together to rebuild our lives and find a new sense of normalcy. I also decided to take a new approach to my road trips. I planned my roads carefully, choosing well-lit, populated stops and avoiding areas that felt too isolated. The trips became less about escaping and more about embracing the freedom of the open road with confidence. Over time, the fear of encountering the woman again began to wane. I still had moments of anxiety, but I faced them with a newfound resilience. The highways that once filled me with dread now symbolized my journey through fear and healing. I drove with a sense of purpose, each mile representing my strength and the progress I had made. Emily and I continued to build our life together, and the experiences we shared only strengthened our bond. The woman from my nightmares remained a haunting memory, but I was determined not to let her define my life. I had faced my fears head-on and emerged stronger. As I drove down the highways, I felt a renewed sense of freedom and hope. The darkness of the past had given way to the light of the present, and I embraced each journey with a sense of peace. The road trips that once symbolized fear now represented resilience and the courage to keep moving forward. And so, I continued to drive, each trip a testament to my recovery and the enduring hope that even in the darkest moments, there is always a path to the light.